never imagined my evening would end like that. My husband's boss offered me a ride home after the company dinner, something polite. But what happened on the way left me stunned, questioning everything I thought I knew about myself. The night had that soft, glowing energy that only comes after a long, elegant evening. It was my husband Daniel's company dinner held at an upscale restaurant downtown. The dim lighting, expensive wine lists, and quiet conversations that hummed beneath the sound of clinking glasses. I'd worn a dark burgundy dress, something I hadn't taken years, but it hugged me in just the right way. I hadn't felt that kind of attention in a while. I was nearly 60, but that night I felt alive. Daniel had too much to drink, as he usually did at these events, and ended up getting a ride with one of the junior associates who lived nearby. He kissed my cheek before leaving and whispered, "Matteo will take you home," he offered already. I looked over and saw Matteo, Daniel's, waiting near the entrance. Jacket draped over one arm, calm and composed as always. Matteo was older than Daniel by a couple of years, but somehow seemed younger. He had that sort of quiet confidence you can't teach. His hair wasn't a flaw, was an asset. Like every line on his face had been earned, not regretted. We'd spoken only briefly at the dinner earlier. It's polite laughs, a shared look, and someone made an awkward toast. In one moment, just one, where I caught his gaze lingering a second longer than it should have. As we walked toward his car, the cool air wrapped around my shoulders. Matteo noticed and gently put his jacket around me. It smelled faintly of cedar wood, and something I couldn't name. I thanked him quietly. He opened the door for me like a gentleman, old school touch that oddly made my heart beat a little faster. The car rided normally. Smooth jazz played low on the radio, and the city lights cast fleeting patterns across the windshield. We talked about the dinner, the company, how Daniel was doing lately, but then the conversation shifted. "Beautiful tonight," Matteo said, his eyes focused on the road ahead. His voice was steady, but there was a different kind of tension in the air now, the kind you feel more than hear. I paused, unsure if I'd imagined it. "Thank you," I replied carefully. "That's sweet of you." Silence followed, comfortable at first, but then too quiet. I could feel something building, like a question waiting to be asked. "I've always wondered," he said slowly, "how someone like you ended up with someone like Daniel." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean by that?" He glanced at me briefly, then returned his eyes to the road. "Don't take it the wrong way. I just mean you're present, thoughtful. There's a warmth to you in Daniel. Oh, he's a good man, but he doesn't always see what's in front of him." I didn't know what to say. My fingers curled into my lap. My heart was thumping now, not fear, but from the way his words seemed to slip through the cracks, I didn't realize were there. We stopped at a red light. He looked over at me. He looked, "Has anyone told you that lately? That you're worth seeing?"
My breath caught. I shook my head slightly, unsure of how honest to be. Not for a long time. The light turned green, but he didn't move right away. Instead, he leaned back, exhaled, and asked softly, "Would you mind a longer route home?" "Just a bit! I could use the company, and I think maybe you could, too." I should have insisted he just take me straight home. But something about his tone, not pushy, not arrogant, just open, made me nod instead. "Okay," I said, almost in a whisper. He turned the corner, and the city slipped us, replaced by the softer edges of suburban streets. We drove in silence for a few minutes, but it wasn't uncomfortable anymore. It felt like something was unfolding between us quietly. You don't have to answer this, he said after a while. But are you happy, Jessica? I stared out the window. I could see my own reflection in the glass. The outline of a woman decades caring for others, managing routines, silencing her own needs. I swallowed hard. I don't know, I answered honestly. I think I stopped asking myself that. Matteo nodded slowly, like he understood more than he should have. He parked the car in front of a park, one of those small neighborhood ones with old trees and benches under street lamps. We didn't get out. He simply turned toward me, resting one hand on the steering wheel, the other on his knee. I've been where you are, he said, going through the motions, watching life from a distance. It's alone, isn't it? Even when you're not alone. That's when I felt it. Not desire exactly, not yet, but connection. Something real, something unspoken. I never thought anyone saw that part of me, I said, my voice cracking slightly. He smiled gently, eyes soft. Sometimes all it takes is one person who does, who sat there under the dim orange glow of the street lamp. Two people who weren't supposed to this way, who hadn't planned for any of it, but couldn't pretend anymore. He didn't touch me. He didn't even reach for my hand. But something had shifted permanently. And I knew, as he finally started the car again to take me home, that this night wasn't the end of something. It was just the beginning. The car from the park back toward my house was quiet, but not awkward. Something had changed between us. It was nothing dramatic had happened, and yet it felt as though we decrossed an invisible line that couldn't be. The hum of the engine was the only sound for a while, and I was grateful for it. I needed the silence to think. My heart hadn't calmed down since I asked if I was happy. The truth was, I hadn't thought about that in years. Not seriously. Life had just become a rhythm. Not a bad one, just predictable. Dinner at 7, the news at 9. We were companions, Daniel and I. But that sense of being seen and wanted it had faded quietly, like the last light of a long sunset. When Matteo pulled up in my house, he didn't park right away. He slowed down and looked at the driveway, then glanced at me. "Your lights are off," he said softly. I looked too. The house was dark. Daniel hadn't made it home yet. Didn't surprise me. I knew how those nights went. Drinks turned into after-hours conversations, and those turned into excuses. Matteo looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. "I could wait with you," he offered, his voice low and even. "Until he gets back?" I should have said no. I knew how that might look. But the thought of going inside into that cold, quiet house alone felt heavier than I wanted to admit. I hesitated just long enough for him to understand I didn't want to be alone. "I'd like that," I said. He parked at the curb and turned off the engine. For a moment, we just sat there side by side in the darkness. The interior of the car was dim, lit only by the soft street light outside. It felt like the world had paused for us, like time itself was giving us space. I hope I didn't cross the line earlier, Matteo said. I wasn't trying to interfere. It's just hard to stay quiet when I see someone hurting. You didn't? I replied. You were honest, and that meant more than you realize. He looked over at me. Really looked not at my age, not at the lines around my eyes, or the years behind me. He looked at me like I was whole, like I was a woman who still had stories left to write. Jessica, he said after a long pause. Can I ask you something personal? I gave a small nod. Do you ever miss being touched? Not just physically, but emotionally. Being held in a way that feels like you matter. His question hit something inside me I didn't know was still tender. I felt it in my chest, I turned to him, eyes brimming, not with sadness, but with the ache of recognition. All the time. I just stopped admitting it to myself. There was a pause between us. It wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick with understanding. I could see him weighing something in his mind. Cautious, respectful. I'm not trying to push you into anything, he said quietly. But if I were your husband, never let you go to bed without reminding you how extraordinary you are. I didn't respond right away. I couldn't. His words sat heavy in the air, not in a burdensome way, but in the way truth always does when it's finally spoken out loud. I used to think needing that made me weak, I said, but now I think maybe I've been strong for too long. He gave me a soft, almost pained smile. Being strong doesn't mean going without love. We sat like that, two people with years behind us, staring into a quiet space filled with things we weren't supposed to feel, weren't supposed to say. I didn't want the moment to end, but I also didn't want to run from it. So I did something I hadn't done in years. I reached over slowly and placed my hand on his. It was a small gesture, barely more than a whisper of touch, but it felt like a door opening. He didn't or pull away. He simply turned his palm upward and held my hand like it mattered. That was it. We didn't kiss. Didn't cross any boundaries that night. But when he finally walked me to the door and waited until I turned the key in the lock, I felt seen in a way I hadn't in decades. As I stepped in and leaned against the door, heart full of unspoken things, I realized that something inside me had shifted. It wasn't about Tio, not entirely. It was about me. About remembering that I was still a woman with feelings. With the right to be more than just someone's wife in the background of her own life. And maybe, just maybe, that night was the beginning of me reclaiming that